Should we talk about your latest
Should we talk
film?
about Standing Woman? Yeah, talking about the grim futures.
For people who are watching on video, because this might actually end up on Spotify eventually if I ever get my arse into kit. At the moment, it's YouTube only. There is a poster I'm holding at the moment of Max's latest film, Standing Woman. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about Standing Woman. And again, thinking about that idea of taking something that could be a positive and spinning it on its head. So this is an adaptation of a short story by Yasutaka Sisui, who's a Japanese writer. And in the short story, it's set in a world where instead of people being put into prison and imprisoned for their crimes, they're planted in the ground and they turn into trees. So it's kind of a green...
I saw the trailer and I got the gist of that from it, but I didn't realise it was, instead of going to prison, that's what happened.
So it's a green initiative. A way of kind of making things, like we're going to put back into society and nature and all these things. But folks don't come back from being turned into trees. So it is ultimately a death sentence, but they're still living just as a different kind of entity. So
can they still talk and stuff?
No.
Oh.
They will eventually just become
be a
trees.
Tree.
Yeah.
I see, but it takes a long time.
Yeah, it's not a quick process.
Right. What's the... Do they just get planted in the ground to begin with then? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I saw
that in sort of public places, almost as that kind of warning to others.
Oh, so it's sort of like being in the stocks as well.
Yeah.
That kind of idea. Okay.
So what starts out as imprisoning people who've committed crimes very quickly becomes a way of the government taking control of people who are dissenting voices. And so in the short, Tom is a filmmaker.
Oh no.
Yes. He's
and that's why that's why we're here today.
Yeah, we need to talk about things, Tom. The main character is called Tom. He makes the sort of propaganda films for the government. And his wife has been planted kind of for standing up for his creative ideals. Now, in the original short story, he's a writer, not a filmmaker. So that's one of the shifts for the adaptation. But the same, his wife has been planted into the ground for being outspoken and standing up for him being for his creative freedom. And for people being creative and for their own idea, and that at some point it will be dangerous for folks who are creative they'll lose their voice. They'll still have to just say what the government wants them to say. And so it's their sort of last interactions as she is turning into a tree.
Oh, right. And that's what the short film was based on.
That real kind of poignancy of that moment of there is no way out of it for them, but they have to sort of come to terms with it. So it's not a happy short.
It's a really interesting concept, though.
But
the trailer looks amazing.
It's a fantastic concept. I read it when I was in Tokyo doing some research as part of my PhD. So I spent 3 months in Tokyo. Thank you to the Japanese Society for the Promotion of Science for sending me out there to interview Japanese writers about their process. And I read the short story and thought it was fantastic and immediately just wrote I could see how I could adapt it to work for a British context.
Right.
And so I did that.
So this was purely sort of a passion thing.
This was just a fun... I wrote it not to make or anything like that, but just as a kind of exercise of something I did one evening.
Did you contact the author?
Okay, so that's so I just did that for the heck of it, because it was fun. I sent it to Tony Hipwell, who's a friend from the filmmaking community, just as a sort of I bet you'll enjoy this. At which point he was like, "Do you think we could make this?" And I'm like, "Right, we need to get the rights." And thus 2 years of pursuing the rights for the project, which we eventually managed to get. Mostly because I'm tenacious and annoying, and I just kept emailing the publishing company Kadokawa.
Were they ignoring you, or were they?
No, they were very polite,
right? But
also
go away.
You can't afford this. And yes, we would like to pay no money to you to adapt this film. Sisui is quite a famous writer in Japan. If you've seen anime. The film Paprika is based on a novel that was written by Yasutaka Sisui.
Right.
as is the film The Girl Who Leapt Through Time.
Okay.
So he had some very high profile, and there's a lot of live action, but I'm an anime geek, so I only know the anime stuff. But yeah, so I just kept emailing, and eventually some poor person at the other end said if I could get a letter to him in Japanese, that they would pass on the letter to the author, and if he approved it, then we're cool.
Right.
And I was like, yep, that's fine. I have many friends who are Japanese.
Oh, good.
I will get this letter to you. And we did, and he said yes.
Wow.
And then the author is involved a lot more in the project on contracts in Japan. So we had to send him a version of the screenplay, also translated,
Oh, my word.
to approve before we could make the film.
So that required more favours from your Japanese friends. Was it all favours?
Yes.
No money exchanging hands. And this is...
I know,
It's a
thank
miracle,
you.
really. It's quite remarkable that you've managed to do this.
It's like, thank you, Miyuki. Poor Miyuki, who sat across from me while I was studying for my PhD.
All right.
And who has done quite a lot of translation work for us on that. So that was very helpful. Also, I've never had my language choices scrutinized so much as having someone translate my work into another language.
In what way?
So asking me, like, when you use this phrase, what do you mean? Because within the context for a new language, I could use this or I could use this. What was the root of why you chose these words?
Wow.
And because they sounded pretty, it's not a good enough choice.
But that is sort of a choice sometimes when you write, and maybe using alliteration, for example, or just kind of the rhythmic up and downs of things. But that's not going to translate, like you say, into a different language necessarily.
No, so you're starting to think of like, okay, well, I did like the sound, but what did I like about the alliteration of it? What did I like about the sound? What am I trying to convey here?
Wow, that sounds like a massive task.
It's really fun though. And yes, I've never really thought about my language choices quite so much as in that moment.
So you probably learnt a lot from having it translated into Japanese.
So that was really interesting.
Nice.
But we did that, and then we went into the production. So the director, Tony Hipwell, kind of put together a really fantastic team. Jenny Sitlia, whose name I've just butchered, sorry Jenny, is a Finnish female DOP who we'd all worked with before as well. Bethan King was the production designer. And quite a lot of other folks involved. We really wanted to kind of keep the Japanese nature in some elements of this. So I was very lucky through a friend who I also met at the University of York to be put in touch with a female Japanese composer who wrote the soundtrack for the film. That was Sekiko. And so that was really interesting. When we came to cast the project, that was really difficult. So we wanted to have an actor who was Japanese. Initially, the male character, Tom, was British Japanese, but on our budget and with our constraints, we couldn't find an actor at that point who was male and British Japanese or Japanese. And we didn't want to do that thing that other people do where they cast like a Chinese British actor as a Japanese character for that sort of cultural integrity to the project. So we found Yuriri Naka, who plays the character of Mari in the film, and she was so fantastic. We're like, okay, we'll switch the character. So we'll have the character of Mari being played by a Japanese actress, female actor. That's the right terminology now, yes.
I don't know.
And then we found Anton Thompson, who plays Tom, to be the kind of that partnership, and that worked really well.
All right, fantastic.
So really trying to kind of stick with that Japanese feel. So we wanted to continue the flavour of it. When we were looking at kind of sort of how it would be filmed, there was a lot of thinking about Japanese cinema and things. Could we bring things into that?
Right.
Into the project as well as it being shot in Yorkshire
I thought you said Japan for a second then.
with a ruined castle in the background, and it's just it's really like it's got a really interesting vibe to it.
I can't wait to see it. So the trailer at the moment is on Vimeo if anyone wants to watch it. I'll put a link somewhere.
Cool. And the film is available on YouTube fully. It's distributed by Alta, which is a horror streaming platform on YouTube.
Oh, amazing. Cool. I'll look out for it then.